At West Point, the motto is duty, honor, country. And few cadets ever took that more seriously than Scott Smiley. Known as Scotty to friends and family, he was a straight arrow, a leader among leaders with a promising future, and a high school sweetheart he adored, Tiffany Elliott.
You talk about beauty on the inside, but you also describe her as just as pretty as any magazine cover.
Oh, she's hot.
Class dismissed!
Scotty Smiley graduated in 2003, just after the start of the Iraq War. And by December, he and Tiffany were married.
Could you have pictured standing there, saying your vows, how your life would unfold?
Not at all. Not at all. I mean, we thought we kind of had it figured out, and it was almost like everything was so perfect.
By the spring of 2005, Scotty Smiley was a platoon leader in northern Iraq, an area where car bombs were becoming more common and lethal. For Smiley, the duty was tough, but the mission in his mind was sound.
Every day that I woke up, despite me not getting any sleep for the last 24 or 48 hours, meant that I was doing something productive, meant that I was making a positive difference in not only another country's life, but my own country's life, that I was protecting my wife back home, my family, my parents, my brothers and sisters, that the impact that I was continually making was making a difference.
And so, one April day, Smiley didn't flinch when his platoon rolled up on a nervous-looking man driving a suspicious-looking car.
I yelled at him to get out of his car. He looked at me, he faced me, raised his hands up like nothing's wrong, but he still wasn't moving or didn't do anything, then began pulling forward, kind of pulling away from me.
So the last thing you remember is what?
The last thing I remember is seeing that man's face and his hands in the air. And that's, in all honesty, that's the last thing that I remember seeing in my life.
At that moment, the driver set off a massive bomb, sending shards of metal through Scotty Smiley's eyes and into his brain. Close to death, Smiley was quickly stabilized and put aboard a life-saving airlift. When he woke up 2 weeks later at Walter Reed in Washington, D.C., he was surrounded by family he could hear but not see. The doctor said he was partially paralyzed and totally blind.
In my mind, my life was over. I had, in my opinion, no reason to live. I couldn't see, I couldn't walk, and unfortunately, at that time, I didn't trust in God. I didn't trust in my wife. I know, unfortunately, the beautiful woman that I married, I was not nice to.
Smiley says his spirit was crushed. When he was awarded the Purple Heart, he cried through the entire ceremony.
One of the second worst days of my life was when the ophthalmologist who had worked 8 hours on my right eye the day before came in and told me that I would never be able to see again. It was hard. It was definitely difficult.
It seemed that there was no place for a blind soldier to go but out of the Army. But somewhere deep inside Scotty Smiley, the despair gave way to determination.
I cried for about an hour, but then I said, you know what? I'm getting out of bed. I'm not going to be an individual who just squanders my life away because of what has been given to me. I'm going to make a step forward.
Instead of accepting medical retirement, Smiley decided he'd fight to stay in uniform. He sought the advice of a family friend, Lieutenant General Robert Van Antwerp, now the head of the Army Corps of Engineers.
Our hope and prayer all along was that Scotty could continue to serve and be productive, and he had no intention of wanting to get out. From day one, that he was able to speak to us, I want to stay in. There is a place for me. And so we were holding fast to that.
After grueling physical therapy to get back in fighting trim, Smiley began an all-out campaign to convince his superiors that he could still contribute, blind or not. He went back to West Point and taught leadership classes to cadets, then got himself into Duke University's prestigious business school, where he graduated with an MBA. And earlier this year, Scotty Smiley took command of West Point's Warrior Transition Unit as the Army's first blind active duty officer. Now it's Smiley's job to lead by example and help other wounded or ailing war veterans fight their own battles, to stay on active duty or transition to civilian life.
He's the old Scotty. He doesn't see through his eyes, but he sees in a lot of different ways.
Smiley's readiness to accept a challenge has become a habit. Last month, he took part in the West Point Triathlon. Most of it lashed to his buddy, Captain Jeff Pickler. And in the years since his injury, he's summited Mount Rainier, surfed solo in Hawaii,
and right,
skied Vail, and jumped out of a plane. His blindness hasn't stopped him or even slowed him down.
Here's the thing, and the reason why I think people look at you is, you could say that God spared him once. Why
Right.
push it?
Right. But then I'm like, it's still life. Like, you only have one life to live, so I'm going to let him live it. And I know he wouldn't be a very fun man to live with if I kept him from those things.
In a book out later this month from Simon & Schuster, a CBS company, Scotty Smiley says he's found ways to compensate in other areas of his life as well, like in the delivery room when his first child was born.
We didn't know what we were having, so no one in the room knew. The doctor just took Scotty's hand and rubbed it in between Grady's legs, and so Scotty was the first person to know what we had.
So, Scotty, you got to say it's a boy.
Yeah.
It's a boy.
I got you.
There are 2 boys now, 3-year-old Grady
1, 2,
and 1-year-old Graham.
go!
You do have a beautiful family, and I
Thank
know
you.
when people tell you that, it's a compliment and it also stings.
It does. It hurts me very badly to know that I'll never be able to see my wife again. It crushes me to know that I'll never be able to see my children. It's hard. Like, when my sons were born, it was very difficult to know that I'm never going to be able to see you. And it doesn't take anything away from my responsibility to care for them, but it still hurts. It's been a life-changing experience.
Scotty Smiley says he spent a lot of time wondering, why me? But these days, he'd rather focus on the road ahead.
It's great to be back here and be a part of the staff.
You said that when you initially woke up that you saw yourself as a failure. You don't see yourself as a failure now.
There's always room to improve, though. I want to continually improve in my life.
He's been called a hero more than once, but Scotty Smiley sees himself as any other Army officer, someone who fought through adversity with his faith intact and with his goals clearly in sight.